فيكم بحلقة جديدة من بودكاست بلا عنوان. مثل ما عودتكم كل المواضيع اللي بنحكي فيها مختلفة، ويمكن فيها جرأة أكتر من المواضيع التانية اللي عم تسمعوها حالياً على السوشيال ميديا. بحلقة اليوم بدي أحكي مع شخص من أول وأهم مؤسسين الحركات الناشطة ضد المنظومة الصحية اللي عم بتدمر لنا حياتنا. انتوا عارفين عن شو عم نحكي ورح تعرفوا أكتر خلال الحلقة. سوزان عازار هي ضيفتنا اليوم. سوزان أول مرة تعرفت عليها كان عن طريق جروب على فيسبوك، وعرفت من وراها معلومات كتير مهمة وكتير خطرة عن صحتنا وعن صحة أولادنا. رح تخبركن هي أكتر عن تجربتها الشخصية، كيف فاتت بهذا المجال وكيف ابتدت ببريطانيا وبلشت بهالحركة اللي امتدت حول العالم وبالعالم العربي كمان. سوزان الحكي لك.
مرحبا. أنا بدي أستعذر منكم، رح أحكي بالإنجليزي لأن مني كتير نشطة بالعربي. بستعذر. Okay. So my name is Suzanne Azar. That's how I'm known. My story begins in the 60s. I grew up in West Africa and my father was very involved with the Rotary movement. So my dad was responsible for bringing the oral polio vaccine into the area where we lived. So I grew up very pro-vaccine, extremely pro-vaccine. Not in a very conscious way, but just one of those things. You just do it. You don't talk about it. You don't think about it. You don't argue about it. Of course you vaccinate. So when I got married and I had my first child and I was going to take him to be vaccinated, my mother came with me. And she made the comment to me that, isn't it too much too soon? He was 2 months old. And I remember, God forgive me, I turned around and I looked at her and I said to her, Ma, you know better than the doctors now? And that was the beginning of my journey. We were in England, okay? So my son was born in England. He was a very calm, placid baby for the first 2 months. And then suddenly he just was very fussy, wouldn't sleep. He'd scream, arch his back and scream. And the doctor said to me, it's colic. Give him colic drops. Fine. And then it settled down and then it started again. And then it settled down and then it started again. And then he was fine for about 8, 9 months until he was about a year and something. And then he started getting ear infections, one after the other, one after the other. And in the spate of, I think, a 10-month period, he must have had 8 doses of antibiotics. And he wasn't even 2 years old yet. And he was just very, very sick. So with the ear infections, he lost hearing. With losing hearing at that age, he lost speech. With the ear infections, the swellings, he lost balance. So with him being so unwell, potty training went out the window. And we went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor. And in England, you have to be referred to specialists. And I ended up going to God knows how many specialists. And the last one, at the time I was horrified, but actually I now bless this doctor and say, thank God, because he was a slap in the face. He was an Arab. And he looked at the notes and he saw that I'd been literally half around town with my boy. And he just turned to me and he said to me, listen, just go and have another child. I'm not going to tell you how I reacted. So from the doctor's office, I went to my local library in tears with my boy in a pushchair. And I was pulling out medical books. And I was like, if these so-and-sos can't fix my boy, I'm going to fix him myself, you know. And this young woman who worked at the library came over and she asked me what was going on. And I explained to her and she said to me, you don't want to be here, you want to be over here. So she moved me from the medical reference side to the self-help side and started pulling out books. And she's pulling out books about homeopathy. I had no clue what that was. Osteopathy, no idea what that was. Nutrition, this, blah, whatever. I must have read about 50 books, skimmed, because I'm a speed reader. So I skimmed about 50 books in the space of 2 weeks. And I decided what I was going to do. So I was going to go for cranial osteopathy, and I found a practitioner near me. I was going to go for classical homeopathy, and I found a practitioner near me. And I put him on what was then not popular, but that's what people used. It was called the Feingold diet. And I also put him on a gluten-free, casein-free diet. And I gave him probiotics. And I had to hunt around for probiotics because this was in 94. I think there was one company that made probiotics. And within a year, he improved. And then on his third birthday, he got chickenpox. And when he recovered from the chickenpox, he was fine. He was back to normal. The circles around the eyes had gone. He was sleeping. His tummy was normal. His bowel movements were normal. Then I looked at him and I was like, okay, كتر خير الله. كتر خير الله. But what on earth just happened? And I looked back at the past year or so and I thought, I don't understand what just happened. Now, in between all of this, and I had ignored it because I was in the middle of the crisis of trying to sort him out. We had an episode on a plane, and we'd ended up at a hospital from Heathrow Airport, an emergency. And we were attended by what's called a locum doctor. Yani he's not a regular doctor. He was brought in as a replacement from somewhere in St. Kitts in the Caribbean or something. He saw my boy, he looked at me, and one of the questions that he asked me was, what immunizations has he recently had? And I didn't understand the word immunization. So he looked again at me and with this look on his face, and he said vaccinations. And I said, oh, he's had all his vaccines. Are you kidding me? You know, I grew up in Africa, my kids, everything. And he just rolled his eyes at me. And I thought to myself, you know, in that sort of moment of not being fully clear and rational and whatever, my child was in emergency, I just kept thinking to myself, why? What did I say? What did I do wrong? Well, why is he rolling his eyes at me? And he said to me, find out what the last vaccine was that he had and get the packet, I don't know what he called it, the piece of paper that comes in the box.
Yeah, the
And
insert.
we call it package insert. So I did. I went to my doctor, my GP, and I said, what did he have? And it was the MMR. So I said, can I have the piece of paper that comes in the box? Oh, we don't have it. Ask the nurse. I went to the nurse. Oh, we don't have it. Go to the chemist. I went to the chemist, the pharmacy. Oh, we don't have it, blah, whatever. So I'm just being sent round and round and round. And in the end, I asked to see the box and I took the address off the back and I wrote to the manufacturer and said, can I have this document? And it finally arrived. It was pages and I think like 30 pages. I can't remember how big it was. And I couldn't understand it. So I took it to the GP and I said, can you please translate this for me? So she's reading it and she suddenly rocks back in her chair and she looks up at me and she goes, huh? Not exactly, huh? But, you know, the look on her face. And I said, what? She said, otitis media. And I said, what's that? She said, chronic ear infection. And I said, are you telling me that something I did has caused all of this with my son? And she said, well, it looks like it. So I filed that away until my boy was better. And then I brought that document back out. And I thought, if it happened to my son, it must have happened to somebody else. Have I done enough? And at the time, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Google, we had the C prompt. You have to be of a certain age to understand what I'm saying now. And we had the AOL listservs. This was even before Yahoo. I started searching on AOL and I found a group of parents whose children had had the MMR. They were mainly in America. And they were talking about the things that had happened to their children. And that was when I realized how lucky we had been. Beyond that, then I got onto Yahoo, and on Yahoo you had all the groups of the parents talking to each other. I found a group of scientists who were sharing their work for peer review. I don't know how I got onto that group, but suddenly I was on a group with scientists who were sharing their stuff that you had to pay to read online if you could get access to it. I have to say, for the next 15 years, all I did was read the science. I'd say mid-95, around 95 up to about the year 2000. And then in the year 2000, I was burgled. And the only things that were taken were my electronics. and my hard drives. I had external hard drives where I had saved all of this stuff very neatly, tidily, so I could access it. But by now, I really understood what vaccines couldn't do. And I had started to try to understand how the body works. And in the meantime, we had had a daughter, and I asked my GP a question. I said, this happened to my son. We don't know why this happened to my son. Is it possible that we have some sort of a genetic susceptibility in the family? And therefore, if I were to vaccinate my daughter, is the same thing going to happen to her? And the GP said to me, I don't know. I said, well, in that case, I'm not willing to take the risk.
بهيدا الوقت أنت كنت بعدك مش أكيدة إنه الفاكسين اللي سببت المشاكل لابنك، أو بعدك بمرحلة البحث كنت؟
مقتنعة, definitely مقتنعة إنه that's what it was. بس I don't know how to describe it. It's like I didn't want to believe. بيقولوا لها لأني they call it cognitive dissonance. I did all the legwork to understand how I needed to recover my child. But in terms of the bigger picture, I couldn't quite wrap my head around the fact that this panacea, this miracle of vaccination, this global effort to keep everyone healthy, that it was all untrue. I found it very, very difficult to wrap my head around that, I have to admit. And I'm a product of linear education. I found it really hard. But I just kept going لأنه خايفة على أولادي. And then the next step for me was starting to understand what was happening أنا. لأنه أنا كل مطعوم تألف اخترعوا اخذته. إذا مش مرة مرتين. يعني بيأديك بس إنه بيجانا cholera vaccine. Up until the age of 18, I think I had it. I think it was every 6 months. I've had yellow fever vaccine. I've had the smallpox vaccine. I've had the BCG vaccine when I was a baby. I nearly lost my foot. I didn't find that out until I was 50. My mother told me when I was 50 that as a baby قررت الماما ما بدها يني الطعام بإيدي ولا بجنبي ما بيعمل سيكاتريس. So قالت لهم يعملوا لي المطعوم بكعب إجري, the sole of my heel. وعزرت إجري, and it got to the point where they were considering, I don't know, whatever, as a baby. And I have a very big scar actually on my foot. But I didn't know that until I was 50. I had عرفت مشاكل صحية, like little things. In your 30s, like little niggles would happen, and I would wonder why. Then met someone who was a naturopath in England. She was a homeopath and a herbalist. But one of the things that she asked me to do was a timeline of my own health. And I was horrified. When you do it, when you write things down, you see patterns that you don't see when it's in your head. Or for me, that's true, maybe because I'm so linear. And it just suddenly made a lot of sense. I would have a vaccine and I would have a major health episode. For when my daughter was born, and people would challenge me, and I would say to them, I'm delaying. Well, she's 27, we're still delaying. So around 2000, I started to look around and think to myself, okay, what do I do now? All this information that I've got, what do I do with it? So I started thinking, do I write articles? I joined some more Yahoo groups, parenting groups in England to try and form a community around me that felt safe in a way. We would come to Lebanon every year. I've always done that since I was a child. I've come to Lebanon every year. And I would try to strike up conversations, and I'd get pushed back time after time after time until I learned that I needed to keep my mouth shut, because it wasn't just my story, it was my children's story. My husband's family were more open. My mother-in-law had 7 children. She tandem breastfed, she home birthed, she everything. She did the whole thing. And the only one of the 7 that was vaccinated is her youngest. My mother-in-law was more open, but you realized very quickly that it's not polite conversation. And then I would have reactions from people. For example, we're sitting at a table. My daughter was playing with a little girl sitting next to her, and somebody made the comment, oh, she's not vaccinated. And the mother came and yanked her daughter away, horrified. I'm Lebanese, but I mean, being British-headed, I just looked at her and I said, why did you do that? And she said, your daughter's diseased, she's not vaccinated. I said, actually, my daughter's not the one that's had the diseases injected into her. Your daughter. And everyone on the table just went really quiet. And I thought, oops, I need to measure my reactions in such a way as not to destroy the relationships, because it's not just about me. It's also about my husband. It's about my son. It's about my daughter. It's about their relationships. I then pulled back. بصراحة, for about maybe 5 years, I pulled back. But I was helping in England with people who were educating me. We have a lady called Magda Taylor, who's one of our legends. She ran the Informed Parent magazine for years and years and years. And her children much older than my children. So she was someone that I looked up to. And then there was someone called Janine Roberts, who was an investigative journalist. So these were people that I was reaching out to, and I was saying to them, if there's anything I can do to help. So when Magda Taylor brought in people from Australia to do a big seminar on vaccine safety and vaccine health, I was there, I was helping. For example, I met Andrew Wakefield. So these were all people that I was kind of spending time around, because my children were growing up, and at the schools that they were going to, we were being challenged over their vaccine status. So I needed to understand how I could protect my children without being confrontational. So that was something I needed to learn.
المدارس مطرح ما كنتي عايشة كان مسموح لأولاد يكونوا مش مطعمين؟ لأنه هذا
إيه.
السؤال بيسألوه كل الأهل خاصة بالدول العربية.
ببريطانيا إيه. ببريطانيا it's very much choice. However, they can make it very, very awkward, and sometimes they make mistakes. فبيطعم الولد ولا ما الأهل يعرفوا. So when my daughter was about 10 years old, they were supposed to have a science trip. They were going to go stay overnight somewhere. And on the form, it said that she had to have a tetanus jab. So I basically returned the form saying no. The teacher queried my daughter in the classroom in front of all the students. My daughter basically said, I'm not vaccinated and my mother doesn't believe in vaccines. And the teacher responded in front of the classroom, well, your mother's very stupid then. When my daughter came home and told me this, I took myself to the headmistress. Remember, by now I've learned not to be confrontational. So it pays sometimes to act dumb, okay? So I went in and I said to her that I was concerned about the way that the teacher had spoken to my daughter and the fact that she'd spoken to her in front of her classmates, and that this was an invitation to bullying, basically, in isolation. And I said to her, has something changed? Is it now mandatory to vaccinate? She said, well, no, not for the school, but the venue where the trip is going to may have their own policy. I said, well, could you please request their policy documents for me? So she did, and I read the policy documents, and there was nothing in there. I went to speak to the teacher, and she wouldn't see me. And then in the playground, I stopped her as she was coming out of the classroom in front of the parents. So she basically informed me that she was not going to take my daughter on the trip, no matter what I did, no matter what I said, and that she was going to involve her union. So I turned around and I said, well, I think that's probably a very wise thing for you to do professionally. And perhaps what we should do, my husband and I, is get our solicitor involved. Now, my husband had no idea any of this was going on. And we didn't have a solicitor. And I never heard anything. And my daughter went on the trip. Sometimes things don't pan out the way you feel they should. I wanted to be vindicated, but that was about me. It wasn't about my daughter. The objective here was that my daughter got to go on the trip and that she was not burdened with all the junk that comes with being different. So I had to battle myself to back off, because it wasn't about me being vindicated and being patted on the back and being told you were right, darling. So those were lessons that I had to learn as a parent, to just allow it to be about them. And then Facebook came on. So 2007, Facebook, my father calls me up And he says to me, get on Facebook. My father, who had moved to Lebanon by then,
Your father اللي هو pro vaccine.
was. We had had our conversations by now. My mother still vacillates, but my mother wouldn't have the COVID vaccine and she would not allow anyone wearing a mask to come in the house. So that it doesn't have to be 100%. People do what works for them. And now that I'm the age that I am and I've had the decades pass, I'm realizing that despite all, there's no such thing as a perfect outcome, a perfect solution. And really the most important thing is the relationships in your life, your relationships with your children. So for example, with me, with my kids, I always involved them in everything I was doing. In 2007, I get onto Facebook. The first thing I do is I search vaccines. And I found a group that had almost just started, that was based in the US. And I joined it. They allowed me in. And there were all sorts of people in there that I didn't really, I recognized the names, but I didn't really know that much about them. People like Suzanne Humphreys. And then they had a troll attack on the group. They had one admin in the West Coast, one admin on the East Coast, America. But it wasn't really just an American group. They had people from the UK, from Australia. So when I would be on, they would all be asleep, America. And this one day I was on in the morning and I was in the files, the documents section of the group because I was looking for something. And as I'm scrolling, I realized that they were disappearing one after the other. And instinct took over and I started copy pasting. And I managed to save probably about half the files. And then when everybody woke up, I messaged them and I said, listen, I think there was a troll attack. This is what happened. If you let me have your email address, I can email you the documents that I saved. So the next thing I knew, they asked me if we could have a discussion, like with the admin, including me. And I said, of course. And I suggested in that meeting, it would be really clever to have a website and I'd be willing to help pay for it. Out of all of that, I was then asked to be an admin because I had mentioned to them about the time zones. And I said, it would be clever to have somebody in Europe and maybe somebody in Australia. So then we selected somebody in Australia and I became an admin of Great Mothers Questioning Vaccines, which was probably the first really good, strong, fact-based, evidence-based group, but also a parent support group, but also that had professionals in there, medical professionals. So that was 2007. By around 2009, my husband and I were really seriously thinking about moving back to Lebanon, or for him moving back, for me moving to Lebanon. I've never lived here before. So I started looking to see what was going on in Lebanon. On the surface, سطحياً ما في شيء. Everyone is pro-vaccine, everyone is pro-antibiotic, everyone is pro-whatever. Nestle, everyone. It's just, and I kept thinking to myself, my God, I'm not going to be able to live in Lebanon. It just felt so alien to me that I would have to live here and buy Nestle, which I haven't done since the 80s. I started doing a little bit of a search and I found a group that said Vaccine Something Lebanon. And there were 7 people in it. The creator of the group was a lady called Soha Nasruddin. So I contacted her and I said, I'm going to be in Lebanon. And she said, great, we'll meet. So we met in the downtown and I walked in and أنا ما بصبغ شعري كان بأيامها سهى ما تصبغ شعرها أنا قصيرة and I'm a little bit overweight وسهى كمان. And I walked into this cafe and it was like I'm looking in a mirror. Amazing, amazing, amazing woman. And then I found out she was an obstetrician. And then I found out that she does home births. And then I realized, oh my God, now I understand where it is. The community that I've been desperately seeking in Lebanon is all underground. It's all under the surface. And that's when I really started to get excited. From Suha, other people started reaching out, and I got a message from a young woman called Laurence Derhof-Sepian who lived in Jordan. We met up. We met in a cafe. I walked in and it was literally looking at a much more beautiful, much, much younger version of myself. So we talked about Great Mothers. We talked about all sorts of things. And then I thought, you know what? we should open a group for Lebanon on Facebook. So I spoke to the admin of Great Mothers and I said, would you guys franchise the name? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, I really want to open Great Lebanese Mothers Questioning Vaccines. And like, go for it. So I did. We started having people join. What I did was I just loaded up the group, all the files, the documents, everything I had on my computer went in there, literally just in there. And my aim was not so much to start a group like Great Mothers Questioning Vaccines, because you need an army of admin to run that. What I really wanted to do was I wanted a core of parents who were willing to learn what they needed to learn and pass it on. So the membership of the group initially was just Lebanese. And then you'd have someone, Danish lady who was married to a Lebanese guy who wanted to join the group because she lived in Lebanon. So we did that. And then we had Lebanese people living in Dubai. So we did that. We had a Greek lady in Dubai who also wanted to join. We changed it from Great Lebanese Mothers to Great Middle Eastern Mothers. And I opened it up a little bit. But the idea was that we would have hubs. So a hub in Lebanon, a hub in Dubai, a hub in, all the different areas where people lived. And over the years, that has happened. It took a while. But over the years now, there are people doing all sorts of things, and that group is no longer active. But the information's all still there. My thing was that I wanted it to be like a resource, a library, somewhere that people could come back and refer, to be able to share useful information to people that they loved, or people that they cared about, or people who were asking them. But the beauty of it is that so many things have come out of it. So one lady who lived in Jordan came to me one day, basically said, we don't have resources in Arabic. I was like, no, we don't. Actually, no, we don't. There's nothing in Arabic. And my Arabic's very poor and I can't read and write it. So I'm not the right person to be asking. So she and her husband set up a website where they translated the package inserts and they subtitled videos. And at the time, there was a video going around called the chalkboard video. And I got her to do the subtitles in Arabic for that. That was something that was shared worldwide. Now we have a group in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, Saudi Arabia. The ladies from Saudi Arabia blew my mind. They're so smart, switched on. So while all of this is going on, in 2007, I got a call from Magda Taylor. I had moved, my husband and I had moved from our home where we were in England to a small town nearby. And she said to me, there's a young woman in your town that you need to meet. I was like, okay. So she gave me a number and I phoned up and I get this sweet English voice. Anna Watson invites me round for a cup of tea. It turned out that Anna had her own story with vaccines and all of that with her child, her children. And she had decided to find out what was going on locally. So instead of thinking globally the way I, Africa, Lebanon, England, blah, she was thinking locally where she lives. She put out the word, I'd like to talk to other parents who were querying vaccines. And she had, I think, the first meeting at her house, there were 12 people. And they were parents who were either pregnant or had had a child or thinking of having a child, or people wanted to start that conversation where they lived. So the first Arnica group was in Kingston. I think the second Arnica group was in Sutton and then Wimbledon. This is all sort of southwest London. Then it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. Now we've got, I think, 120 around the country. It was about creating a little village, a safe space to be able to talk about these things, to be able to query these things, and also for families who had made similar choices to be able to meet each other. So when you come into the towns and the cities and the main cities, مثلا نحن, Greater London, you've got 12 million people living in Greater London. There's not really a sense of community. You don't know your neighbors, your family doesn't live near you. As a parent, you rely on services, babysitting. And I remember once my sister-in-law said to me, why you take your children with you when you go to the dentist? Why don't you leave them with the neighbor? ليه ما تخليهم مع الجيران? I remember just looking at her like, are you crazy? What do you mean leave them with the neighbor? هون بلبنان if you live in an apartment block مثلا ببيروت جيرانك قرايبينك صاروا. هونيك لا, people don't. They're very territorial. So this Arnica group idea was really sort of trying to bring back that feeling of being part of something that felt safe. And Arnica has a very big presence now on Facebook, tens of thousands of members in all sorts of different groups. From that came the whole vaccine injury concept. I didn't identify my son as vaccine injured anymore. Okay, but that experience, that trauma still lingered for me. It still lingered. Was aware that there were groups of families clustered around specific vaccines. There was no real conversation happening between them. And this was something for me that was an inspiration from Arnica. I kind of wanted them to talk to each other, to become one community, if only for moral support, nothing else. I started reaching out. مثلا, we had the HPV group, بإنجلترا, which was run by a lady called Frida Birrell. Frida was all about the parents and putting them in touch with people who could help, maybe not recover their children, but ameliorate the symptoms somehow. And then there was the group that were all about the DPT. The DPT group had parents with children who were very, very old. You know, they were older than us. So there are children that had died in the 60s, for example. So I met one gentleman who lived in Wales, whose daughter at the time was 63, in diapers. And he was in his 90s when his wife had passed away. And his daughter had been injured by the DPT. So there was that group. Then you had the MMR group. So when I came across the MMR group, then I fell into that whole rabbit hole of Andrew Wakefield and the court cases and the lawsuits. And the thing that shocked me is that the MMR group, when you look at the numbers, for example, the lawsuit had 1,000 families. And if you think about it, to get 1,000 families to agree to participate in a lawsuit, percentage-wise, they must have talked to 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 families. How many? To get 1,000 to agree. So the numbers are phenomenal and hidden. They're all hidden.
The reported injuries
Yes.
usually are 1% only.
Yes, that was a study that was done, actually, I believe, in the US. And they said it was about VAERS. They found, I think it was done at Harvard, I can't remember exactly. They found that serious events, 1 in 10, and non-serious events, so not life-threatening, was 1 in 100. What's non-life-threatening? My son's situation was non-life-threatening.
الناس ما بيعرفوا الاشياء اللي عم بتصير مع اولادهم
لا
بسبب الفاكسين، معودين انه ممكن تكون اسباب
لا
تانية بسبب شو بيقولوا لهم الدكاترة. هيدا السبب انه ما بيروحوا يبلغوا او يفكروا
مزبوط
يدوروا عن
مزبوط.
السبب مثل ما انت عملتي.
ايه بس انا ما عرفت كمان لانه انا وقتها كان ابني طفل، يعني على الشهرين وقتها اخذ اول مطعوم، كيف يصرخ يقوس ظهره ويصرخ صريخ. هلا صرت اعرف انه هيدي بسموها encephalitic cry، يعني دماغه عم بيورم، دماغه عم بيورم، ألم بدماغه، مشان هيك هيدا سبب الصرخة. that scream ما بنساها بحياتي. بس ما عرفت. I didn't know. He was 2 months old. بعدين راق، بعدين رجعت طعمته، رجع عن جديد. ما I didn't make the connection. الله يسامحني. I did not make the connection. أنا بقولها.
eventually يعني اخذت معك قد ايه وقت لحتى حطيتي الرابط؟ كان حوالي سنة او اكثر؟
وقتها رحنا بالإمرجنسي من الطيارة على المستشفى بهيثرو، وهذا الحكيم قال لي what was the last inoculation، متذكرة قلت لي. For me that was the moment.
ولحظتها بطلت التعميم؟ يعني قبل كل الوقت مع كل خوفك عليه وكل ابحاثك كنت بعدك عم بتطعمي؟
Oh yeah, because I was protecting him. I was protecting him. He was my
بس
baby.
بحالة
Yeah.
ابني كان محظوظ نوعا ما إنه ما صار معه أوتيزم بلحظتها، ما كانت
Oh,
عوارض
he was
الأوتيزم
on
كتير
the
قوية.
هون بدي أقول شغلة مهمة كتير. أنا الأشياء اللي عملتها فيه لابني، الرجيم والإكسكلوجن دايت اللي عملته والبروبايوتكس، في حكيمة اسمها ناتاشا مكبرايد، هي روسية ومجوزة بريطاني، ألفت الجابس دايت، gut and psychology syndrome diet. كانت عاملة like a conference بإنجلترا. رحت، كان وقتها الويسترن برايس فاونديشن عاملين a whole weekend وعازمين كل شي في ناس ومنها الناس هي. So I went along. إنه بدي أسمع شو عنا عم تحكي. وهي عم تحكي وعم بتخبر عن الأكل وعن الهيدا وعن الهيدا. And I'm thinking to myself, that's what I did. The hell? And I knew nothing. Okay. I have a master's in finance. I'm a numbers person. I knew nothing about anything to do with health, nutrition. كل هالأخبار هيدول ما كانوا يعنوا لي أبدا. I was all about having a good time, going to work, making some money. And I'm an 80s girl. You can imagine. Anyway, so I go to this thing and she's, her talk. And afterwards I bought the books and went to have them signed. And she was very nice. She would talk to people. And I'd hung back, so I was one of the last people. And she said to me, "So what's your story?" So very briefly, I said to her, my son had a problem, ear infections. This was in 94. This is what I did. And she looked at me and she goes, "So you did the precursor to the GAPS diet. How did you know?" And I just stared at her. I said, "I didn't. Genuinely, I didn't. I don't know." And أبقلك بصراحة, I felt like I had somebody standing behind me, poking me. لا, not that direction, go in this direction. And I attribute it to my grandmother who passed away when I was pregnant with my son. And she was someone who was very, very special to everyone, not just to me. But in my life, she was very special. She was my guide all the way through growing up from very young. And she was a very unusual woman. And as she went to Africa when she was a preteen, I think she was 12, and she worked. She was a career woman, ربت ولادها, very, very strong. And she couldn't read and write. She never learned to read and write. And she was partly deaf. A very powerful woman, very, very powerful woman. Had some very strong opinions about the world and how it worked and how it should work and how it should be and what a woman should be. ذكر مرة كنت, I must have been about 6, and I have 4 older brothers, and they're quite a lot older than me. And I remember, they were horsing around and I must have gotten tangled up or something and I flinched. ومسكتني وجرتني على الأوضة like angrily, مسكتني بإيدي وجرتني على الأوضة وقعدتني على التخت وقعدت على التخت التاني قدامي وطلعت فيي. I can never forget that. Like I didn't do anything wrong. عمل لي, you never let a man see you be afraid. Never. ما فهمت شي. Okay, teta. Much later, I asked her about this. I must have been about 15, 16. By 15, 16, I was very political. I was going on marches in London and all sorts of stuff. I asked her, I said, "What do you think?" And I reckoned I was a feminist at that time. قالت لي, "We born them." She was in Ghana. "We born them and we bury them. Women should never be afraid of men." And that really kind of gave me some sort of a perspective of me being capable, which is difficult when, you're the youngest of 5 by far and the only girl. I didn't have a very high opinion of my ability to do anything, but that was very powerful for me. And that stayed with me. So she's someone who's had a lot of influence on me. And the key thing that she gave me growing up was a sense of me, a sense of my own capabilities, and a sense of, I'm not going to say empowering me, but letting me know that I was enough. So I don't know whether she was with me in that library or not. I didn't think of it at the time. But in retrospect, when I think of the way, and it's not just that occasion, there are other things that have happened. I think we do have guides. I think it's important that we recognize, خاصة بلبنان. No, I've lived in Africa, I've lived in England, I've lived in America. I was in America for 5 years. I've never really lived in Lebanon, but I've come here every single year, and I'm 60. Every year I've come to Lebanon. And I'm married into a very traditional family. Mountain, rural, phenomenal family. who have still held on to many of the old skills, foraging, fermenting, herbal medicine. My mother-in-law used to بيجوا لعندها when like they had a tummy ache or whatever. Very different to my family. My family is very metropolitan, very educated, very traveled. Lebanon, this year I've been here a year on my own. My family is in England and I'm here on my own, caring for my mother who's 94 and trying to find a way. Because I said to my husband, if we're going to retire in Lebanon, I need to learn how to live in Lebanon. And now that I know that I have a sub-tribe, I just want to figure out how to do it. And in Inglaterra, I know exactly what I'm doing. I run I run a business, whatever. But here, I don't know. And I have the problem with the language as well. One thing I've noticed, Horny, the women run the show. No question about it. The men may be out there visible, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. But I sense that the real powerhouse of the family, we know this, are the women. The men feel fragile to me. The women don't really have an ego. I mean, some do, yes, I'm generalizing. But I'm really proud to be a Lebanese woman. I'm so proud to be a Lebanese woman because I look around me and I see these phenomenal women doing the most amazing stuff, keeping their families together, keeping them healthy, keeping them fed, not looking for someone to pat them on the back, and with no support. I mean, moral support, family support, but no support from the dawla. Don't forget, I live in England. In England, بتتفركشي and like there's 100 different services that are available to you if you're willing to play the game. هلا نحن مبدئيا we don't, but it's there. You can choose to have it. هون it's not there. So you have to rely on yourself and you have to rely on your support network. Maybe your sisters, your aunties, your uncles, the people you know, your neighbors. And this is something that has just blossomed for me this year. I think this is the year when I was supposed to learn about this. The conversations that I'm having with the young women that I meet is there's an expression in England where they say, don't throw the baby out with the bath water. Meaning, yes, it's all very well, modern, aspiring, wanting to be, I'm going to say Western, but don't forget the treasures that we have, بلبنان. Okay, the traditions, the history, the interactions, this total chaos, which I love. I hated before. Now I love it because it's complete civil liberty. It's so different from me being here. أنا بإنجلترا بطلع من بيتي, there are 8 cameras outside my house. And I don't think people who live here realize, when they say London, Paris, New York, California, I want to go to Australia, I want to go to Canada, I want to go to Germany. Great, go. But come back. Come back. If I had the choice now, I would raise my children in Lebanon. I would not raise my children in anywhere else. مع كل اللي عم بيصير. And I think this is important for us to acknowledge.
هيدا بينطبق على كل الدول العربية.
I was just thinking that. You're right. Absolutely right. لأن مثلا لما أفكر مثلا no, we're living in very strange times. Very, very, very strange times. There's a lot of very weird stuff going on. بس برجع بتذكر بيي الله يرحمه بيي كان عمري 21 سنة وعم نقنق. I was like, yeah, but the world and then. And he just looked at me and he said, sit down, sit, Hamid. I'm going to talk to you about your grandfather. He was talking about his father-in-law. Okay. So my mother's father. قال لي, your grandfather was born in the 1800s. قال لي وقتها كانوا العثمانيين وصار في مجاعة بلبنان. Fully 30% of the population of Lebanon died of starvation before he turned 15. And then the World War broke out. And then the influenza pandemic broke out. And I don't know how many million people died of that. And then you had the Great Depression in the 1930s. And during this time, all of a sudden, food became unrecognizable because all of a sudden, food preparation and creation came out of the home into factories. You suddenly had new products that had never existed before, like mazola oil, canola oil. We never had oil before. Packaged foods, tinned foods, things in boxes. They never existed before. Plastics. And then in the 1940s, they invented antibiotics. And then we had the Second World War. I remember this, the look that he gave me. And he said, and you think you have it hard. You think you have it hard. And to be honest with you, I think we're going through the same thing now. I think we're living the same period of extreme transitioning, extreme change, very fast paced. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. In the medical arena, especially, I think it's very important that we realize. You go to the doctor and you say to him, what are the chances of, for example, and I had a very, very bad back injury and they were pushing me to have an operation. The doctor that I was talking to was giving me percentages and it dawned on me. He's telling me 12% of people have a problem with this and 5% might have that and 2% might have that. And I just flashed back to my son because one of the things that the doctor had said to me about my son was that this is very rare. And I remember thinking to myself, it may be rare, but when it happens to your child, that's 100% of your world. So when the doctor was saying to me about the operation, and I thought to myself, but if I'm that one person where it goes wrong, that's me done for. That's 100% of my world. So I need to find another way. I've managed to get myself out of bed, out of a wheelchair, off the walker, by exercising, by seeking out the correct advice, finding a very good physiotherapy team in the UK who were phenomenal and let me have a routine that was specific to my case, that I can exercise and I can strengthen my muscles to support my bones so that I can walk. Nothing is impossible. هيدي النقطة. If you're willing to invest the time, مش بس the time, the courage. You have to have courage. You have to have faith and just believe that you will find a way. Like when somebody will say to me, my daughter has a fever. But if they know my background, they will ask me. I will then say to them, for years and years and years, we were told, don't medicate a fever, don't medicate a fever. And then we found out that the guidelines, the medical guidelines in the United Kingdom say up to 5 days, do not medicate a fever in a child for 5 days, unless it's a tiny baby or they're dehydrated. That's for medicating a fever. Medicating pain is a whole other story. I'm talking about specifically fever. Because at the end of the day, the choice you have is either fever or antibiotic. So either you let the body burn off whatever it is that it's fighting, or you take a wild guess and think, okay, maybe this one antibiotic out of I don't know how many hundreds might work. And then you have to think about the side effects. Because there are some antibiotics that have some very severe side effects.
بدي أسألك على الأنتيبيوتكس. أخذ وقت معك لتنظفي ابنك من الأنتيبيوتكس؟
I don't know.
لأنه في
لأن
كتار بيعتبروا it's okay إذا أخذنا مرة كل شهرين أو كل 6 أشهر أنتيبيوتكس. ما بيعرفوا قد إيه بده وقت لينضف الجسم من الأنتيبيوتكس، قد إيه بيبقى بالجسم.
And there's no real way of measuring outcome of taking the antibiotic. هلا أنا اللي عملته إنه for 5 years I gave him probiotics. وعلى كبر it's all about fermenting. بس بالنتيجة his gut is sensitive. حتى هلا he's in his 30s. His gut is sensitive. So has he fully recovered? I don't know the answer to that. Have I fully recovered? I can't tell you how many times I had antibiotics as a child.
عن الفترة اللي فكرتي فيها كيف أنت تنظفي جسمك وقد إيه فايت فاكسينيشنز بجسمك.
أي.
شو عملتي على كبر؟ أطفال أوكي في لهم روتين محدد أو بروتوكول محدد، بس الشخص الكبير الأدلت اللي اوريدي قطع عمر محدد، هل في أمل كمان ينظف جسمه أو ما يزيد الأذى؟
هلا ينظف جسمه شيء. You need to work with what you have. And I've had episodes of potentially very serious illness. And each time I've managed زيح. I don't really want to go into details, but I know what I think because I have a list of those vaccines and I've got a list of all the side effects potential from those vaccines, and I can match them to the set of symptoms that I've had. But then I've had antibiotics as well. I had a period of time in my life where I ate garbage, كله fast food. We don't live in a simple environment. مثلا لما كنت صغيرة كانوا يرشوا لنا DDT بقلب أوض النوم بأفريقيا للبرغش. ويسكروا الشبابيك ويدوروا الاير كونديشن. But we live in toxic environments, and my thinking from very early on was to lessen the toxic load where I can. I can't control maybe the air quality where I live, but I can control the quality of the food that my children eat. I may not be able to control chemicals that are around them in their school environment or whatever, but I can choose not to inject them with heavy metals, مثلا. So you pick and you choose what you're willing to live with, what you're not willing to live with. And you pick and choose the risks that you're willing to take. Some people may be willing to take the risk of something going wrong with the vaccine because they're terrified of measles, مثلا. To my thinking, it's because they don't know enough about how to recover from measles, which is why we should be talking to our great-grandmothers about how they recovered measles. Vaccines have only been around for what, 200 years? Measles vaccine's not, it's been around less than 100 years. What did humankind do before that? So those are questions that people need to ask themselves. بالنسبة لإلي أنا personally, and where I'm at, I've been an avid user of homeopathy. I use herbs. Diet is very important. And it's important to find something that works for you. So you need to be in a place where you're able to interpret the messages that your body is sending you. But at 60, I take no medication. Nothing. ولا ضغط ولا nothing. Which is unusual when I go for my blood tests and stuff. You know, they always ask you, شو بتاخدي أدوية? I'm like, ماشي. I'm like, قد إيه عمرك? Yeah, I'm 60. But even things like cholesterol, triglycerides, all of that is manageable. You do not need to pop a pill for that stuff. Diabetes, manageable. And these are the common things that everybody around me that I know, everybody's on blood pressure medication, everybody's on statins. And it's heartbreaking. The key is moderation. إذا بدك تيجي تقولي لي أعمل رجيم أنا وممنوع هاي وممنوع هاي ما حضايق. There's a concept called feast and famine. إحنا أيام زمان, we never knew where the next meal was coming from. Food was a very scarce resource. إنه مثلا يذبحوا مرة بالجمعة. يعني you might eat a chicken on Sunday. بقيت ما بقى sandwiches, فطاير, حبوب. And then on Sunday you have a big meal. يعملوا حلو. مثلا بيخلق ولا بياكلوا مغلي. ما بتاكلي مغلي كل يوم. So this feast and famine keeps your body off kilter, not quite expecting where the next meal is going to come from. And apparently what that does is it refocuses your body from autoimmune to functioning survival. So I introduced that into my way of eating. I've tried all the diets from vegan to vegetarian to juicing to fasting to intermittent to ما بعرف شو. I've done them all of them. When it comes to food, keep it as simple as possible. Nothing out of a box. مثلا هون بلبنان تقولي للواحد اقطع الخبز صعبة. بس why اقطع الخبز؟ اوكي لأنه كل القمح وحتى الشوفان مرشوش glyphosate. ما في مهرب. هلا إذا ما فيك تعيشي بلا خبز, then I would say go for sourdough. لأنه أنا مثل ما عم بقول لك إنه I'm 60. إذا الله بده يعطينا 10 سنين أو 20 سنة ما بدي أعيش هون. I don't want to be weak. It's about quality of life now. I want to be able to walk. I'm diligent about exercising. I want to be able to sleep. Sleep is a big problem. A lot of women my age have a problem with sleep. Prior to this, I think from the beginning, food, garbage in, garbage out. It's as simple as that. In as far as anyone can, I believe they should keep food as simple as possible.
شو بتنصحي الأهل اللي بدهم يحاولوا يحافظوا على صحة أولادهم حسب تجربتك؟ والتجربة أكيد اختلفت من التسعينات لهلأ.
من ناحية كل شيء مش بس الأكل. أول شيء أهم شيء ما حدا بيعرف الولد مثل ما أهله بيعرفوا. If you think about when a child is born today, mum's health, mum's pregnant, mum's offered vaccines while she's pregnant. Baby's born, day one, baby's offered all sorts of medical interventions, vaccines, you name it. The birthing experience, in and of itself. All of these things have an impact. All of these things set the stage for what happens afterwards. For example, one of the things that we noticed with the MMR cases where the children were very, very badly injured, there was always something else that had happened before. Sometimes it was several doses of antibiotics prior, or the child was vaccinated while they were ill. But when you hear the stories over and over, you see patterns. So the things that I would caution is, if you haven't had your child yet, think. You're creating a life, and you want to create that life in a way that works. What works? You wouldn't put diesel in a petrol car. You wouldn't put petrol in a diesel car, right? So biologically, what works for us? لدرجة إنه رح نقول انسى the last 200 years. Think before the last 200 years. What did parents do? Humanity has been going for how many 100,000 years? Babies are born, they grow up, they grow old, they die.
في ناس بيعلقوا إنه كانوا الناس يموتوا كتير صغار، والسبب
Okay,
إنه ما كان في فاكسين وما كان في أنتيبيوتكس. هيدي حجتهم.
okay, that's fine. And that's their prerogative. If they're convinced of that, it's not my place to tell them no. أنا مني هون to convert. It's not my job. I know what I passed through, and I know what my experiences are. I'm not here to preach to anyone. I do what I think is right. They do what they think is right. In terms of parents who are asking, how do we do this or how do we do that? Then yes, more than happy to give my opinion, my personal experiences. And also my observation of the tens of thousands of families that I have come across as the person who worked within vaccine injury in the UK and has for decades, for 27 years, that's what I did. And I can tell you the things that kind of make sense to me, but everyone has to work it out for themselves because they have to select what works for them, for their children, for their lifestyle, and for their pocket, because all of this stuff can get very, very expensive. So you have to pick and choose. الواحد يكون واقع. And this is the reality, unfortunately. هلا نحن we live in a very toxic world. For example, if you live in Beirut, buy an air purifier for your child's bedroom. It's a simple solution. It doesn't solve all of the problem, but what it does do is it lessens the load. From infancy, try not to let your child get used to sugar. They can have sugar. I'm not going to say not have sugar. And I'm assuming here that your child is well. If your child is unwell, هيدا غير حديث. If your child is well and you want them to stay well, simplify the food. نرجع الطبخ. So pizza becomes a treat once in a while. Hamburgers, a treat once in a blue moon. نرجع على الأصل. نرجع على الطبخ. على الأساس. Fresh food. Food that you can recognize. Food that you don't have to read an ingredient list. And if you pick up a packet in the supermarket and you look at it and there's more than 5 things on the ingredient list, put it back on the shelf. Trust me, you don't want it. So I had this thing, I don't buy Nestle. I grew up in Africa and I was there and I witnessed their campaign to promote formula. And what that did was it decimated breastfeeding in Africa and it caused all sorts of problems. But actually, it's not just about Nestle. It's all of anything in a packet. Be suspicious because your body doesn't recognize that as food. It recognizes a cucumber as food. It recognizes arishe as food.
كل شيء طبيعي.
Yeah. And it's not that hard to do. Okay, if you're living in the city, yes. But we have farmers markets in Beirut. You can do it. And I'm not saying 100%. But then you come to another level, which is to give you the idea that when I said that if I had the choice, I would raise my children here. When it comes to schools, a child's success in life is not so much reliant upon the school that they go to. It's much more their home environment and also obviously them, who they are as individuals. And the world that we're living in today is very different to the world that we lived in 40 years ago. Very different in terms of career choices, in terms of immigration choices, in terms of future, in terms of all sorts of things. كله هيدا بيربط بعضه. It's all about lifestyle. You've got the food. You've also got the school مثلا, the peer group that your children are in, the kids that they're with. Some of the stories that I'm hearing هون بلبنان يكونوا الأولاد بمدرسة. It so happens إنه هول الأولاد منهم مطعمين. And as the kids grow older, بيلفتوا نظر, because it was more than one child, all from the same family. All three of them very robust, very healthy, very bright. And the parents had their own ideas. مثلا, they didn't have a TV at home because they didn't really want. And yet the children were in a very mainstream school. And the choice had to be made. And the parents then decided to remove their children from that school and put them in a smaller school, like a local school, بدل ما تكون إنه إف ولادي whatever. So these are choices that you have to make, whether it's food, whether it's schooling, clothing. Are your children wrapped in plastic? How much plastic do you use in your house? Do you really have to buy small bottles of plastic water? Cheaper to buy water in a glass dispenser and then have like a stainless steel or glass bottles, the glass then wrapped in silicone or whatever for the children. It's about how much you're willing to inconvenience yourself, because all of these things were created for convenience, to make life easier. بالإجمال for the woman. So I get it. I really do get it. مثلا, your laundry detergent. How many artificial perfumes are racing around inside your house? الرنس اللي بتحطيه بالغسيل من بعد الغسلة. إذا كل قنينة شمي ريحتها, read what the chemicals are in it. ما بيقولوا لك. You don't know what the chemicals are. بيقولوا لك anionic surfactant, blah, blah, blah. They don't tell you what's actually in them. The cleaning products. كلهم. So, for example, one of the things that I do at home, I use a very simple soap and I use white vinegar as the rinse. بغسيلة. Okay? I don't burn candles. I burn essential oils. I do not burn candles in my house. I don't have air sprays, fresheners, all of that stuff. And I'm very controlling of الرطوبة بالبيت. ليه؟ لأنه mold. Mold is very toxic. And this is a big problem we have بلبنان.
هودي enough إذا بنقدر نهتم فيهم. إذا
Oh,
هالأشياء بس ننتبه لها كتير منيح.
إنه كتار. That's why I'm saying it's about lifestyle. It's about the choices that you make. هلا في عندك إياه مثلا, if you go on holiday, it's going to go out the window. That's fine. It's okay. But the most important thing is don't battle with your children. Don't fight with them. Explain, 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 explain. Because you want these things to grow with them. هلا أنا, my kids are in their 20s and 30s. To a certain extent, some of it is lodged. Some of it is not. بس إنه at this age ما عادوا إنه my kids. They're not, they're fully fledged adults. They make their own choices.
أنت
بس
وصلتهم مع بر الأمان وهلأ هن خياراتهم. بس
this is
الأساس
it.
الفاونديشن عندهم تأسس بشكل صحي.
ايه, بس الحلو مثلا انه الواحد لما يبعد عن اهله بيختار الاشياء اللي ماما كانت تعملها. مثلا تبولة امي مثلا, عرفتي هالشعور. انا عندي بالبيت كنت ما اجيب فيزي درينكس. شو كنت اعمل؟ كنت اعمل لهم ليمونادا. الليمونادا اعملها مثلا ايام بسكر, بس ايام بعسل. وبعدين كنت جيب الفروزن بيريز, حطهم بالجاج, مثلا جاج كبير, اعمل ليمونادا حامض مع عسل ومي, وشيل كيس مثلا كون مفرزة بلاك بيريز أو ستروبريز أو رازبريز, وحطهم بقلبهم يلونوا. Turns pink or it turns purple or it turns whatever. This is a thing. It's a simple little stupid thing that I've been doing for years and years and years and years. And now my kids do that themselves. And their friends think it's the most fantastic thing. It's so simple, very simple. It's easier to get a bottle of Fanta or Miranda, but the satisfaction that I get, and there are ways to do it that are, مثلا أنا بعصر الحامض, عندي an electric thingy, بعصر حامض بعبيهم بقنينة إزاز, بس بدي أعمل ليمونادة بشيل من قنينة الإزاز. And we're very good at multitasking نحن. I worked full time. I had a full-time job. I had my two kids at home. I ran my household. ونحن هونيك مش مثل هون. ما في خدم. You do everything yourself. I did my own gardening. I cleaned my own house. I made the own beds. I مسح الأرض وأطبخ كل يوم. I did everything, which is normal. That's how we live. You learn how to create your own shortcuts. مثلا كنت مصرة بدي أطبخ from scratch. I don't want to buy in pre-prepared food, fast food or supermarket boxed food or whatever. So كنت مثلا نهار الأحد عارفة حالي إنه بدي أطبخ، مثلا إذا عم بطبخ ل4 أشخاص فيني أطبخ ل12، بدل ما تكون الطنجرة صغيرة كبرها للطنجة. عم بعمل قلية أعمل للجمعة كلها وحط بالفريزر. Instead of a meal taking me إنه an hour to do, I can do it in 20 minutes.
هذا تنظيم، تنتبهي للتفاصيل الصغيرة وبتنظمي وقتك، بصير فينا نعمل كل
Exactly.
هالأشياء ومنوفر على صحتنا وعلى صحة أولادنا وعلى جيبتنا كمان.
Yeah. وشغلوا الأولاد معكم. أنا أولادي اثنيناتهم بيعرفوا يطبخوا. ليه؟ لأنه I used to make them help me. You do what works for you and it does not have to be perfect. هيدي أهم شيء. إنه how many times I talk to people and they get so upset that they're not able to control everything. You can't control everything. أنتوا بلبنان. The queen of chaos, Lebanon. You know, you can't control everything.
بس حتى حول العالم هلأ في أشياء صعبة to control it. لا أفتح معك موضوع التاني، موضوع المانديتس بالفاكسين اللي هلأ عم بتزيد، وخاصة بعد بلانديميك الفاكسين فور كوفيد فاكسينز.
Mm.
كيف يتعاملوا الناس مع هذا الموضوع؟ يمكن أنت مطرح ما كنت عايشة ما كان في إلزامية، بس في كتير دول كان في إلزامية وناس أخذوه للأسف. شو فيهم يعملوا
أي.
هيك حال؟
Well, I don't know what to say. نحنا كانوا كتير سرين علينا. You couldn't go certain places, you couldn't do certain things. بس نحنا we have بإنجلترا you always have loopholes للإليتس. And these things are published. So عنا website .gov.uk. I used to troll, اتفرج شوف اطلع شوف. And I would pick out the loopholes and I would use them. مثل مثلا نحنا لما when we were locked down, you were not allowed to gather. But we saw it coming. So like my son, I phoned him up and I said, move back home. It's going to lock down. So he moved back home. And now you go crazy. Who locked in? I looked on the website and I found that you could have like mental health support groups that could gather and meet even during the pandemic and the lockdown. So I put a piece of paper outside my house saying mental health support group and I invited their friends round.
يعني
You
بكل
have,
بلد فينا نلاقي شيء ثغرة
there's
قانونية
something. Yeah,
فينا نتعامل معه ونحل المشكل.
there's always something you can do. There are certain countries that the doctors في حكيم انحبس بأمريكا لأن he was giving record إنه somebody has had the COVID vaccine when he didn't give it to them.
كان عم بيساعد الناس، في كتير
بس
ناس كانت
Muslim.
عم بتساعد حول العالم.
هيدا, if I'm not mistaken, he was stripped of his medical license and he was jailed. But he's just got out on appeal. And it was said that what he did was the right thing to do ethically. في اشياء تانية مثلا نحنا couldn't travel. وأنا بهالوقت my mother had an emergency هون بلبنان. So again, I went on the website and I'm like, what do I do? I need to travel. So it turned out in the website in England, it said, you know, if there's an emergency, family emergency, blah, 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 you can travel. So I used that and I came. بس نحن بإنجلترا, they didn't really mandate the vaccine overtly. And the British are very against all sorts of government interventions. But they did it through the back door. So they just made it very, very, very uncomfortable.
من بعد 2020 هل لاحظتوا في زيادة بالفاكسين انجريز حول العالم؟ هل في حالات محددة أنت بتعرفي فيها؟
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Oh, my God, yes. It's carnage. And you can look up statistics for this. It's carnage. أنا بصراحة, I hate to admit this, but when COVID hit, so we had kind of known something was coming. I did not in a million years imagine it was going to be like this. So when they started talking about it, نحن in our community بإنجلترا وحتى هون حتى بأمريكا وحتى بأستراليا وحتى بأوروبا بفرنسا بألمانيا, we were meeting up online and saying what's going on, because we don't forget we had just watched Event 201, which was a practice run a few months earlier. Plus, we had just watched the World Health Organization Vaccine Safety Summit. I think it was in October or November of 2019, just before the COVID thing. ونحن لأنه it's our thing, we watch these things. يعني Safety Summit, I watched it from beginning to end and then had discussions about it with different people. So when the whole COVID thing hit, I knew what was coming. A lot of us knew what was coming. Talked about it at home. People phoned me up because they know what I do, my friends, my family. What do you think? This, that, the other. And I could see families splintering where the husband didn't want it, the wife wanted it, or the wife didn't want it, the husband wanted it. The kids, two kids that had the jab, two kids didn't, or one kid did and two didn't. And that kind of stuff was going on. It was horrific. It was the most horrible, horrible splintering of society that was happening around us. And our friends who had been fully on board in terms of vaccine safety, but when that fear, some of the things that were said to us, it's not important. I'm not that sensitive about this thing, but the way that people switch when the panic and the fear kicks in, it's like it shuts down their capacity to rationalize. I don't know what it is. I'm sure, it must have happened with me as well. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, the fight flight freeze response it happens لما يكون
it,
الشخص killing brain والخوف كتير قوي ما بيقدر يفكر بطريقة منطقية أبدا.
it's very strange to see it in people that you know and love. And I found the whole COVID, the first year especially, I found it very, very difficult. And then I started to get phone calls. So I was one of the people in the UK that would receive a call saying, for years and years and years, my baby died. What do I do? My daughter had this jab. She can't walk anymore. All sorts. For years and years and years, this is what I did. So when the whole COVID thing started, I remember receiving the first phone call. And I thought, I can't do this. I genuinely, I'm so angry. I was just so angry, which is very unlike me. And I felt like I was betraying everything that I'd done for the past 25, whatever years. And I thought, I can't do that. I can't be the person that people phone. I can't do this to people. It's not fair. So I put the word out and I said, I'm resigning from everything. So I was a member of the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. I was part of the team that brought Vaxxed, the movies, to the UK. We did the premieres. I hosted Suzanne Humphreys and Polly Tommy in the UK. I organised their trip around the UK and Ireland. I was very involved. I did a lot, okay? And I just handed it all back. And I handed over my entire everything to do with vaccine injury to a wonderful young woman in England. Everything. Yeah, we filled 2 cars full, books, all sorts of things. I gave it up. I said, okay, I need to start thinking about my next stage, what I'm going to do. And then I started talking. So I'd be called and I'd be asked to come to some of the freedom weekends. So we used to do these weekends that they're still doing in the UK, where it'd be like a little festival, families get together in tents and whatever, and there would be people speaking. So one of them that I did was in a town called Forest Row in West Sussex in England. And this was for the group that had set up the Freedom Hubs, being Litera. And basically what I talked about was Lebanon. I talked about, this was in 2021, and I talked about the society here, how people support each other, the traditions, the chaos, the fact that everybody pretty much is off grid, even if they live in an apartment, that we don't have piped gas, we don't have piped water, we get like 3-4 hours of electricity a day. And just seeing their faces, they were absolutely horrified. And I thought, my God, we are phenomenal. نحن اللبنانية, we are phenomenal. Not me, I didn't have to live it. But you guys, you're phenomenal. You're amazing. Coping with all of this and still having careers and still raising families and still staying sane. How do you do it? And that really, for me, that was my goodbye to everything UK. وقت النهاردة, that weekend. And then I started to refocus towards Lebanon. Because I know the day's going to come that we're going to move here. So for me, it needs to be my home. And this is it, this is about treasuring and recognizing and seeing what's valuable and using it. It's all very well to get all excited about everything that's Western and advanced and technological and blah and whatever. I hope I don't regret saying this, but I truly feel that this is one of the safest places to be right now. And أنا جيت على لبنان in July last year. وكانت بنتي معي for 6 months. We were here during all of the stuff that was going on. and we were volunteering and whatever. People were still traveling back and forth. Lots of people suffered, still suffering, seeing the end of an empire. And it may take decades. I don't know how long it's going to take. But the global south is rising. So a lot of people that I know, for example, are moving to Africa or to Asia. Choices that I personally am able to make. أنا شخصيا, I wouldn't move to Africa. I wouldn't move to Asia. I want to be where I want to be, home. 47 years in the UK. I now want to be in Lebanon. I've never lived in Lebanon. So there are difficult decisions to be made. The most important thing is to inform oneself and to arm oneself with resources. That's the best advice I can give. Find the resources, sit down and have the conversations that you need to have with your nearest and your dearest, and make your decisions and be flexible. And recognize that you're in an era of turmoil. The whole world is in turmoil. We need to hold our nerve. People are very fearful. And sometimes that fear makes you shut down, as we discussed already. So you need to be conscious of that and be willing that walk. I had a conversation with a young woman who has young children. She was asking me about vaccination, about health, about this, about that. And as I was talking, I could see her switching off. So I sat back and I went quiet for a minute. She's a single mom and she works and she has a mom who's not well and ميت خبرية يعني وهي صحتها is not 100%. And she basically said to me إنه نحن هون همنا إنه إجت المي ما إجت المي في كهرباء ما في كهرباء وين بدي أقعد أفكر فيهم هودا كله بفهمها. I completely get it. It's very overwhelming. But that's where you plug in to that underground system and you get that support and you get the people who have the resources that they will share it with you.
هالأم في أميات غيرها كتير.
Mm.
إذا ما لقوا هلأ الوقت ليهتموا بصحة أولادهم، إنه كل هالوقت اللي كانوا ما عم يقدروا يعطوه ليعملوا هالأبحاث أو عم يتواصلوا مع ناس فيهم يدعمون بهذا الموضوع، لما يكبر الولد حيكون مشاكله أكبر، رح يعوزوا وقت أطول هن كمان ما عندهم إياه. يعني هن وفروا وقت بس بعدين خسروا هيدا الوقت وخسروا صحة أولادهم وخسروا مصاري كمان، لأنه
Of
العلاجات
course,
بعدين بتكلف كتير أكتر.
of course. And this is the point that I say to people. And I say it from the point of view of someone who has witnessed this over and over and over again over the last 27, 30 years. What I try to explain, and I get it's difficult, it's بيقولوا الإنجليز, the devil you know rather than the devil you don't. What's familiar, the patterns and the routines and the comfort and of what's familiar that you're doing every day. We just kind of keep doing the same things over and over. I get it. I do get it. Especially if you're overwhelmed, especially if you feel unsupported, especially if, financially unable. But sometimes you need to act early, but then only you can know what you need to act early on. I know there are many different issues. And it's hard. I'm not for a second trying to say that it's easy or it's not. All of it is hard. But life is hard. It takes a village to raise a child. So if your village doesn't see things the way you see them, you can't fight everybody all the time. Not on everything. This is why I always, always say to everyone who wants to hear anything I'm saying, protect the relationships above all. Always protect the relationships above all. Some relationships you have to let go of. ما عندي مشكلة. I'm not saying that you have to stay in something that's obviously toxic, obviously not working. But those are extremes. The vast majority, it's where you're relying on people you love, your nearest, your dearest, to support you in the journey that you have as a parent. And if they're not on the same page as you are, you can't keep fighting them. You have to negotiate. You have to give and take. There's some things that you'll have to let go of. It's just being pragmatic. This is being practical. لأنه الطريق طويلة.
اللي بده يفوت بهيدا الطريق، اللي بده يبلش هيدي الرحلة، لما بدكن حتلاقوا حدا يساعد.
أكيد.
بدكم مساعدة؟ اسألوا. أنا عم بعمل هالبودكاست وهالمواضيع حتى لين نجمع الناس اللي بيفكروا بنفس الطريقة وبدهم يساعدوا بعض. فيهم يسألوك، فيهم يسألوا كتير ناشطين، فيهم يدوروا على فيسبوك، على تيليجرام، حتى على واتساب في هيك جروبس. يعني في
مم.
مجال للمساعدة. وبدي أسألك كمان، بحال اللي عم يسمعونا قالوا بهمهم المعلومات اللي ترجمت للعربي، كل الأبحاث، كل الدراسات، كل الدوكيومنتس اللي عندك اللي حفظتيها، هل فينا
مم.
نوعدهم انهم فيهم يحصلوا عليها بشي طريقة، او هل في ويب سايت محدد فيهم يفوتوا ويلاقوا هالمعلومات؟
بالعربي بعتقد the website is novax.org.
فيهم يبلشوا من
بالإنجليزي
محل على القليلة، بصير عندهم فكرة، ورح يلاقوا اكيد بمجتمعاتهم ناس مثلهم.
حتى حكمة don't even there are doctors who are يعني they can't speak out because they're risking their careers but they know. even my GP أنا عندي بإنجلترا وقتها كانت قصة ال HPV we had a whole thing with my kids بالأخص بنتي لأنه ال HPV بإنجلترا it comes under Gillick competency يعني your child in England according to the law that they have in England anything that has to do with sexual abuse or assault or anything like that the parents do not have to be informed. So a girl can go and have a termination and not let her parents know. She can be given birth control and her parents don't need to know. The idea is that if she's being assaulted, the majority of sexual abuse that happens برا هون is from someone who's known by the family. هلا what they did with HPV, because quote unquote it's a sexually transmitted disease, they brought that vaccine into that whole Gillick competency, which means that your daughter or now your son in the UK can have the HPV vaccine and you're not told as a parent. And the child is 12. So for me, it was very important that my daughter was capable and able and willing to stand and say, no, I don't want that. Because as I said to her, as your mother, I get to make your medical decisions until you're 18. When you're 18, do what you want.
توعية
ما
الأطفال
عندي
كتير مهمة. من أي عمر برأيك لازم نوعي الأطفال لخطورة الأدوية واللقاحات؟
حسب الولد وحسب العمر وحسب الأهل وحسب جو البيت. اوكي سو كل ام أو بي رح يكون عندهم أفكاره تلحقي شخصيته للولد تعطيه قد ما بقدر ياخد. Okay, you do not want to overwhelm your child because that'll make them shut down, which is not your objective. Okay, so you guide them along. And the most important thing, and this is very, very difficult, is you lead by example. So if you're telling your kids, we don't drink Coca-Cola, it means you don't drink Coca-Cola. Nothing is taboo. أنا ببيتي, nothing is taboo. We talked about everything. They want to talk about gender differences, I have no problem. Completely non-judgmental. I may not agree with them. More than half the time, I don't agree with them. خاصة هلا. All sorts of things. But we talk about them. You're teaching them to listen. You're teaching them to think. And you're teaching them, hopefully, to make decisions for themselves in the face of adversity. In other words, standing in front of a teacher or a nurse or a doctor who is in a position of authority as a child of 12 years old and saying, no, I don't want this. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to build on what's there. You know your child best. Went into school and they had this nonsense where the local clinic would send people round with toothpaste and toothbrushes out to teach them how to brush their teeth. The toothpaste had fluoride in it. Now we don't use fluoride. So I needed to show my child at 4 years old that here's a tube of toothpaste and you say to them, this is the toothpaste I want to use. I'm not telling you not to participate. When the school made things very awkward and then it became really difficult for my child, I would select to remove my child on the day that that clinic was visiting. So you're working with the situation that you're in. And also you're working to the capabilities of your child. My son at 4 and 5 years old were more than capable of saying to a nurse, I'm not doing that, and walking away. My daughter wasn't. It really hurt her to upset an adult, to anger an adult. So I removed her from that situation. because that's her personality and I need to work with what is in front of me.
يعني نتعامل مع كل موقف حسب ما بيتطلب، ومع شخصية كل طفل كمان كيف لازم نحن نتعامل معه حتى نقويه وحتى نحميه بنفس الوقت.
مظبوط.
وهيدي وظيفة الأهل، ومنها وظيفة سهلة أكيد، بس إذا أسسنا عبكير كل شيء بيصير سهل بعدين.
بعدين عندك شخصية الأم، شخصية البي، فعندك أهل إنه they're able to be confrontational. أنا I'm not very good at being confrontational, but I found another way. I act dumb.
كمان
I act dumb, and if something is not working out the way I want it to work out, I remove my child from that. يعني I've removed my children from schools and changed schools, which probably هلا in retrospect wasn't that great an idea, but at the time that's what worked for us.
النتيجة المهم إنه هلا they're safe, they're healthy،
Yeah,
وهيدي هي النتيجة اللي أي أم بدها إياها بالنهاية.
yeah. And they're knowledgeable. This is the important thing, is that they're knowledgeable and they're able to give the one thing I used to always say to them: informed consent. Informed consent, not just consent, informed consent.
بدي أشكرك كتير على هالمعلومات القيمة اللي شاركتيها، وبدي أشكرك كمان على شغلك كل هالسنين ومساعدتك آلاف أو عشرات الآلاف من الناس حول العالم، وإنك كمان ساهمتي بإنشاء مجموعات للتوعية بالدول العربية. شغلك كتير مميز، كتير مهم، وكتير خطر. أنا بعرف إنه في كتير أوقات وقفوا لك حسابي، كنتي عم تتهاجمي أونلاين، ما بعرف إذا كمان كنتي عم تنطلبي للتحقيق بأوقات، خاصة بالفترة اللي ما قبل كوفيد، اللي حركات اللي ضد التطعيم كانت كتير ناشطة بالعالم. هل تعرضتي لأي موقف صار فيه مساءلة قانونية لنشاطك؟
أنا شخصيا legally no. أوكي، صاير أشياء مزعجة مثلا، بس no. مع غير ناس.
بس على فيسبوك صار أحيانا انمحت عندك بوستات
إيه،
أو
مش بس بوستات، جروبات مثلا الفاكس bring vax to the UK. هذا ال bring vax to groups كانوا ال bring vax to the UK was removed. وقتها كنا عم نعمل vax premier الأولاني ل 2017. The venue where we were having the premiere cancelled on us literally 2 days before, even though we'd signed a contract with them and everything. And when we did the second Vax 2 premiere, we had demonstrations outside and ugliness أكتر من ما inconveniences. But we've learned. مثلا, one of the things that we've done for decades is we share information. Why? Because then it's not in just one place. One of the big things in the movement is that, number one, it's nobody makes money out of it. هلا it's different, but no. When we started out, all the resources were shared so that they were spread out. So if one person got taken down, or like in my case, all of my hard drives, everything went. I lost everything. 15 years worth of collecting data and resources. But I had shared everything that I had with other people. So I knew it was out there. So no, I personally have not had that experience, no. People I know have, but I haven't. I've been lucky, very lucky.
في أي نصيحة أخيرة أو رسالة بتحب توجهيها خاصة للأهل؟
للأهل, there's a key point to life with a capital L, which is informed consent. Each of us is a sovereign being. God created each of us for a reason. We have a right to choose. That's why God gave us the freedom of will. And key to that, in my view, is the whole concept of informed consent. So when you're consenting to doing something, you inform yourself first. Even more important, if you're consenting to do something for another soul, for your child, for your elderly parent, very important to inform yourself. I'll give you a small example in my situation with my mother. A few years ago, beginning of the pandemic, I got a call saying my mother had fallen and broken her back. She was 89 years old. I found a way to come. I came to Lebanon. The doctors who had attended her said she needed an operation. I had had the episode with my back the year before. I had had all those conversations with doctors 1 year before for me. So I basically said to him, I want a second opinion for a doctor. And he was very angry with me. I ended up speaking to 12 different surgeons. What I hadn't realized was I was speaking to orthopedic surgeons. And actually, when it's the spine, you should speak to neurosurgeons. Turned out my mother had broken her back previously and it had healed. The real problem was not where the break showed in the x-ray. The real problem was the way she had fallen on her coccyx. She had damaged her coccyx. And that's where the pain was. And it was the 12th doctor who said to me, tell her to point with her finger where the pain is. The break was between her shoulders and she pointed at her bum, her bottom. None of the other doctors had asked that question. Where is the pain? And today my mother is 94 and she's walking and she didn't have an operation. She didn't have any interventions. We did physiotherapy to get her out of bed, mainly for her to overcome her fear.
يعني ما لازم
That's what,
نستسلم ونقبل بأي جواب حدا بيعطينا إياه، لازم نفكر وندور حتى لو أخذت القصة 12 حكيم وأخصائي.
yeah, this is what I'm saying. Hashtag be awkward. زعل مني الحكيم. لو إنه كنت أنا مثلا رابطه أو بيقرب حدا بعرفه كنت انخجلت وعملت مثل ما قال لي يعمل أعمل. كنت عملت له عملية لأمي at 89 years old, a spinal operation. This is what I'm talking about. Things like this. You know, we hear stories all the time about all sorts of things that happen. غلطة حكيم. We know from statistics that are published worldwide that the third leading cause of death in the Western world is iatrogenic. That word means by medical intervention. It could be a medication, it could be an operation. It's an intervention by medical professionals that have caused death. Number 3 in the list of deaths. Number 1 is cancer. Now go find for me the cause of death being measles. Where is it? What do we hear about all the time? Measles. What do we hear about all the time? Polio. What do we hear all the time? Tetanus. Think, read, educate yourself, be informed, then make your decision. If there's one thing that I would say to everybody on the planet, it's this: informed consent.
I totally agree. كمان برجع
Yeah,
بشكرك على الحلقة المميزة. إن شاء
thank you
الله
so much.
نكون إن شاء الله اللي عم يسمعونا يستفيدوا بهيدي المعلومات، وإذا قدرنا لو شخص واحد نفيده ونساعده إنه ينقذ حياة ابنه أو بنته، أنا بعتبر إنه عملنا اللي علينا وزيادة. بس مش معناتها رح نوقف، رح نضلنا نحاول قد ما فينا نساعد الناس تحصل على الدعم لتعرف المعلومات الصح ولحتى تحمي حالها وتحمي أطفالها. وشكرا مرة تانية.
Thank you, Tahrid. What you're doing is very, very important. You're planting seeds of hope and love and community. Very important. Thank you.
أنا بس عم بتبع خطاك أو عم بتأمل إني أقدر أتبع خطاك.
وأنا عم بتبع خطة اللي إجوا قبلي. So we're all in this together. We're walking together. Generations of women, of parents. So yes, well done. Well done.
Thank you.
بتمنى بودكاست اليوم يكون عجبكم، وإذا عندكم أي أسئلة إضافية عن الموضوع اللي حكينا فيه أو اقتراحات لأي مواضيع تاني بتحبوا نحكي فيها، فيكن تشاركوني بالتعليقات.